It's not my problem. It's not my problem. When I feel heavy metal, and I'm pissed and I'm when I lie and I'm missing, oh, look the time, but I'm never sure why I need you. Please let me shout.
All right, welcome to night edition of the Prospect Podcast. We have a great guest on today, Rob Assise from Homewood Flossmoor High School. He's also runs his own facility. I think it's Revolution Training, and we're excited to really talk to him about the whole speed world. He's an assistant track coach there at Homewood, and before I do that, before we talk more with Coach, Derek's right there. What are you eating a sandwich over there? What are you? We got Coach DePascal over there with us as always, and well, we're really excited to talk some more speed and talk athlete development, which is one of the always the hottest topics on our show, and we've explored it in many different ways, and we apply it to the athletes that we work with, and we hope that you as listeners start to apply it as well and figure out which ones work for you and start to apply those principles. So, Coach, it's great to have you on. I'm really excited to talk to you. If you could go into just your background as a coach and where you come from and how you started really kind of developing your program and your development program from that standpoint.
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me. I am a math teacher and track coach at Homewood Flossmoor. So I've been doing this for, I think this is my 23rd year. Growing up, I played just about every sport you could imagine, primarily football, basketball, baseball. But my junior year of high school, my football coach told me that I needed to be out on the track getting faster. So I did that and actually fell in love with track, ended up competing in that senior year. I went on to college to Millikan University and ran track all 4 years there. And since I've been at HF, I've been doing the track thing. I was a head girls coach for 9 years and then moved over to the guys side. So I've been over there since, and I've been an assistant because I didn't like dealing with the headaches that came with being the head coach. So that's kind of where I'm at now. And along the way, I've certainly learned from a lot of great people, and I've had a lot of different experiences within coaching that have kind of framed where I'm at. So I'm fortunate to get to work with some incredible people. So it's been a lot of fun.
No doubt. Now, from a speed and development standpoint, when you is that what you're working with, primarily sprinters? Are you working with all the athletes?
Yeah. So as the assistant, I am primarily dealing with our jumpers, so long jump, triple jump, high jump. But obviously, there's a huge overlap that occurs with the sprinters. So my main technical side is with the jumpers, but we're also, every one of them is sprinter, and that's so yes, I would say I'm also dealing with the sprinters on the regular basis for sure.
And how about on the training facility? So what are you guys focusing? Is it you're training athletes? What are some of the areas that you're focused in on there?
Well, I think primarily, one of the most important things I think that we find is, acceleration is huge. Your ability to get to, certain velocities at certain steps really sets the tone for your ability to be effective as an open sprinter. So I think that's kind of where we base a lot of our time with our top group. But at the same time, and actually this is what I'll be talking about at Track Football Consortium in December. I still think max velocity is a huge component of what we do, and it still holds value. So like when I look at I don't think social media is a good way to judge like how trends are going or anything like that. But when I look at it, I feel like there's there's constant shifts, right, back and forth, where people are debating acceleration, max velocity, and I feel like the pendulum's swinging a little bit back towards acceleration, which is fine. So I figured I'd start talking. I have a talk or present about how I still think that max velocity is a huge piece, but I think those are our two primary pieces overall, and we try to find athlete strengths, athlete weaknesses, and address those at different parts of the season to try to get them to be their best when May rolls around.
Explain a little bit. So we talk about the acceleration versus max velocity standpoint. What is the kind of what is the debate over there from that standpoint? Meaning, which is more important in your development, or what is the debate on that?
Yeah, that's what I feel like. People are. I don't want to say one is more important than the other, and from a track perspective, like I said, I think it's huge to be able to accelerate it effectively. One, to set up your top end speed for sure, and potentially hit that top end speed a little bit further down the track, to be honest. But that's a little bit different from team sports. But I think the debate is like, and I've heard this many times from like field court coaches, is that, my athletes aren't ever going to run more than 20 meters in gameplay, so why would I train max velocity? And I think that's, in my opinion, max velocity is one of the most unique training stimuluses you can come across. So if you don't go beyond 20 meters, you're not going to hit max velocity, and you're leaving things on the table there. So I think that's where I've seen most of the debate is like, I don't need to do this because my athletes are never going to do that in gameplay.
That's an interesting point. So, yeah, and it makes sense 100% from a track standpoint. If you're running a 100-meter dash, reaching max velocity farther down the track can be helpful, obviously, because you're going to be able to lose less of your speed as you get through those last 30 meters. 34. Well, I guess in high school it's probably 40 meters. So. And so there is a difference from that standpoint. But what's interesting is I'm curious on acceleration versus max velocity. So I understand why, ball sports, right? Why they're not as concerned with max velocity. But I'm curious if one plays into the other or back and forth, meaning if your max velocity improves, can your acceleration speed improve? Is there a correlation there, or are they two separate ends of the spectrum that are being developed? So if someone has the ability to reach a higher max velocity, can they reach a higher rate of acceleration? Or is it kind of unrelated? Like if you're developing your acceleration, someone could reach whatever their max acceleration is, regardless of whether they're able to reach their best top end speed. And that's my part A on the question. So I'd love for you to answer that first, because then I have a second part that I think maybe if the answer goes the way I think it might, where some of the sport and court coaches might miss out.
Sure. So I think, I know I'm guilty of this, and I think, and it's mainly because of how we structure training. But I think it's common for us to view acceleration as one component and max velocity as another. But I don't really think you can separate the two. So here's what I mean by that. Like, and this is the obvious one. Like if you are doing a workout that is max velocity focused, let's just say fly 10s or something like that. Obviously, to get to that maximum velocity, you are going to accelerate. Unless you're working on a high speed treadmill and getting dropped right onto it, right? So from that standpoint, absolutely, I think you can improve acceleration just by doing a workout that is focused on max velocity. So that's one piece. I think that it is good to have a day where you are maybe doing shorter sprints, though, because you can attain a higher volume of practicing acceleration, right? So, and anytime you're doing an acceleration workout, even though you're not hitting max velocity, the way that I view it is I am working on improving my ability to set up a higher max velocity in future sessions down the road. So I think they're always connected, even though you may not be focusing on one, or you're focusing on one particular day potentially. It's still, they're still connected all the time.
Yeah, I think they're definitely interconnected. I think the other, and this is kind of where I set this up. Now, football is a little different than, I mean, I guess football and soccer, and maybe lacrosse may have a greater opportunity to reach max velocity in their sport if you're in a breakaway situation or you're in a chase situation, right? Where, you know, I don't know, you got to chase somebody on a streak play, and you got to be able to keep up with them. But what I think is really, so yeah, so you said there obviously is a correlation between the two, and what to me it seems like from just kind of a layman terms, like the ability to shift gears into getting towards max velocity, that gear change from going from acceleration to max velocity, the athletes that have that ability to do that are the ones that score more touchdowns, at least on the offensive side. And on the defensive side, defensive backs, for example, have the ability, or maybe even safeties, have the ability to get in a situation where they can use makeup speed, which can save a play or make up for a mistake if something happens. So I look at it like I see so many times in high school, kids who have excellent acceleration break into the open, and then they're not able to reach max velocity, and they get caught from behind from someone who's chasing, who is able to reach some level of max velocity, right? And so then they always go and say, well, that person's quick, but he's not fast, right?
Yep.
So that's always the but to me, it's there's an element to it. Obviously, some people, you know, depending on their height and stuff like that, some people might reach their max velocity quicker, or have to work more at reaching max velocity. But what to me it is that they just haven't worked on any level of max velocity. And they've heavily focused on acceleration and never and haven't been able to get that gear shift, which will take you to max velocity. That's what it kind of like when I see it. And I've seen a few players this year I watched at the high school level that I think are, wow, this kid's super fast, but he doesn't reach max velocity. So if someone, you know, if it is a long run, he could get caught from behind. Am I on to something from that standpoint, or am I like whale face?
Yeah, I think for sure, and I think I've seen it in a few different ways. But one thing I talk about all the time, and I think a lot of times you have to keep in mind like what the constraints are in regards to the game, right? So
right.
If I'm a running back, and I'm in traffic, I need to keep my feet close to the ground because I'm going to have to consistently make cuts and moves to try to avoid people. So that's part of the gameplay. That's very different than accelerating in track, right? But with that being said, once you are able to get in the open, like I talk about the importance of being able to get upright and run with maybe not like perfect track mechanics, right? But like execute pretty solid max velocity mechanics to be able to not get caught. Yeah, I think that's absolutely a thing. And I think exposure to it is really the only way that you can improve that quality. Sure, like a kid with a low training age could probably get some benefits in their max velocity just by, doing things in the weight room. But I think that's going to correlate more towards their ability to accelerate and not necessarily carry over to what you would see when they're at like their top end speed.
Yeah, that's 100%. I think that's really interesting too. Is that the max velocity component of, what I was thinking was, if you think back to like the 80s, let's say, or maybe still even in the early 90s, when you had or in modern era, maybe a running back like Adrian Peterson, okay, would fit in the mode of a lot of the 80s running backs and the 90s running backs, where you would say Walter Payton was like an acceleration guy, had the ability to accelerate, but but we get caught quite often, on breakaway runs. Tony Dorsett, Bo Jackson, Herschel Walker,
Eric
there was
Dickerson.
there was Eric Dickerson. There was a large amount of guys that were who were really like actually max velocity guys, and a lot of them in the 80s and 90s, and Adrian Peterson was a track guy too. So we're track guys, right? We're track was it's a huge thing. Obviously, the times are faster than ever, and you know this better than I do. But like, I see the 100-meter dash times. I can't believe how many guys run under 10 seconds in high school. It's mind blowing to me. I call it trackflation, and everybody else on the internet calls it trackflation, right? But but obviously you have better training. You have guys knowledgeable like yourself who can develop kids at the high school level. But like in the 80s, you had like the football players that ran track. That was kind of like your lifting was big, but it wasn't like it is now where you can focus, where kids focus. And what I think you had a lot more of was breakaway running backs that if they got into the open, just literally outran people because they were able to get upright, like you said, and to be able to continue to reach max velocity. Where I think a lot more the focus now is a lot more than Adrian Peterson and maybe Derrick Henry are exceptions to that. But you see a lot more of the backs that are footed, right, and acceleration heavy, and may not be even track guys. May just never really get to that level of max velocity. And I think that it's interesting because at the highest level, meaning like NFL, guys like Chris Johnson, when he was playing, and Adrian Peterson, what made them so effective, even in the modern era, was the fact that they could get to max velocity. Like they could get to that level, whereas some of the other really good runners, Jonathan Taylor, I would say, can get to max velocity. Even though he's not like a tall back like those guys are, but he has that, and he was a sprinter himself, and a track guy himself, and he's able to get to max velocity. I've seen, but it's not as prevalent as it once was. Like it wasn't like it almost used to be like a requirement, in the old days, like as for a running back to be able to do that, and that now you don't see that as much. Do you think that's a part of it, like either an emphasis in the training, or is it, because I think that's just how I think in the old days they probably just ran track, and their coach was coaching for the 100-meter dash, and they kind of naturally maybe developed it without even really kind of per se working on it. Whereas now, they're going to trainers and they're working a ton of quick foot drills. Like their feet are lightning, these kids, and their quick acceleration is unbelievable. But then they're not able to go into gear 2 or 3.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that's I can remember probably 10, over 10 years now sitting with Tony Holler talking about it, and I told him with the Track Football Consortium, I was like, you guys are onto really something special, and I think that's kind of been his mission, is to bring awareness to the importance of sprinting at max velocity. And I think we're starting to see a lot of schools utilize it as a quality training modality, which is exciting. But yeah, I think the specialization is still prevalent, and the multi-sport idea, I think, is in pockets really popular, but in other areas it's like athletes are just focused on one thing. And I think, it's important for athletes to play multiple things. From my standpoint as a track coach, I want every one of our jumpers, our sprinters, to play football, because they're going to get exposure to thousands of accelerations during the course of a season. Right. And that's so valuable from a training perspective. It's perfect, in my opinion, heading into a track season. And I think it's the same thing when you look at for a football program. Like I would want my wide receivers and running backs, DBs, to run track, to just get a different exposure where they're really just focused on maximizing outputs and also getting good technical instruction and getting that exposure to running upright.
I think, yeah, that's actually a really good point. And I do think that, um, from a recruiting shifted so much in football. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure as to. I used to be pretty sure that there was like a window of time where like like guys wanted to know the track times of guys, and recruiting's so different now in the last few years because of transfer portals. So like they're not, obviously they're not looking at that when they're getting a transfer. You know what I mean, from one school, then they could care less. They're just looking at their production. But obviously for a high school athlete to have a chance to get recruited as a skill player, I think that may be more important than ever. It's just not emphasized because they have no way to relate you to a 22-year-old who they can get as a transfer, right? So how do I compare a 17-year-old to a 22-year-old without knowing how fast he really is in a skill position? And I say this with even linemen and defensive players, like things like whether they play for defensive lineman or basketball, like whether they play basketball or like are they good at another sport, actually is pretty helpful. Whether a shot putter, discus thrower type of guy, is really, really helpful. But with respect to skill position players, how do you find out? Like that's going to be, I think that's the hardest thing. Like when so many kids that we look at and we deal with, and they're like, well, I ran this 40, at a camp, and maybe they did. Maybe they ran 4.6. Okay. Well, there's a 22-year-old that runs 4.6 that is 20 pounds bigger than you because he's a man. Maybe not tall or anything, but like more developed because he's a man. So I'm taking that. In most cases, I'm taking that man first, right, at the higher levels. So track times could be, and the ability to accelerate is an equalizer. Tyreek Hill, obviously, for the longest time, not only was he quick and can accelerate, but if he got in the open, it was like lights out because he reaches max velocity. Is there uh is there simple tools from a training standpoint that, let's say, an athlete that maybe they don't run track can do to start to be able to develop max velocity?
I think I mean, just going out and sprinting, further than I would say 30 meters, 30 yards is a start. That's always I think where I would probably start. If it's something that they haven't done on the front end, I think just from a safety perspective, always running up a slight incline is a good thing. Just from kind of like, if you've never been exposed to it or haven't been exposed to it regularly, that's always a good place to start, because I knock on wood, but I've never seen anyone ever pull a hamstring during a hill workout ever. So, if you're focused on like max velocity, you want that incline of the hill to be very slight. And then other tools that I really like, this would incorporate the acceleration and max velocity. It's called the bullet belt. So the bullet belt is fantastic. And if I was coaching football, I'd have 50 of these suckers. And because it's just it hits three big things. One, you have a teammate who would be holding the bullet belt. So they're in a position that is very similar to what they would be if they are trying to decelerate. So they're providing that resistance. Their hips are low, and they're braking. So they're getting that deceleration exposure. So it's an advantage for the person who's helping assist with the rep. And then the cool thing with the bullet belt is it gets them in good acceleration position. So it's just like a waist harness. Yep. And then it has Velcro on it. So there's like a ripcord. And you can have an athlete like pull with resistance for 10 yards, let's say. And then the athlete who is providing the resistance can slowly pull the ripcord maybe over the next 5 yards or something like that. And so it provides kind of like a little transition. And then the athlete is fully released from the resistance, and then they can continue the sprint there. So you're getting kind of like a multi-tiered sort of training stimulus. You get your like heavy acceleration, you get your transition, and then you get your sprint after that. So I think that is a really great tool. I would call that like isodynamic resistance. It's a little cheaper than getting like a Dynaspeed or 1080 Sprint. You can get a bullet belt for a little bit over $100, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. The bullet belt is great. I have one of those at home. I use that on my son, and it's phenomenal because it gives that jolt where you have to accelerate. And then what about stuff like changing speed? So when they're running, like when they roll in, they hit a certain level of acceleration, they roll back, then they reaccelerate,
Sure.
or they roll in, accelerate, and then try to lift a little more or lift the drive. Do you do anything like those kind of type of drills?
Absolutely, you're speaking my language here for sure. So I love flying sprints. I think they are fantastic, but I do think it's important to be able to have some other tools in the toolbox. So one that I'm really a big fan of, I think it's the most versatile tool anyone can have, is just what I would call it a crescendo sprint. So it's very simple. You're just starting out at a slow speed, and maybe every 10 yards you're building a little bit more. So you tell the athlete, hey, by the 20-yard line, I want you to be at 70%. By the 30, I want you to be at 80, and progressively go to wherever however long you want that to be. That's been a huge tool for me in terms of like I've had athletes who are like, coach, I'm just not feeling it today. So, and we had like flying sprints scheduled. So I'm like, okay, well, let's just try this crescendo sprint. And you're going to build up to like 80%. And then they come back and they say, that felt okay. And I'm like, okay, let's build this one up to 90%. And they're like, that felt okay. All right, let's go 95. It feels good. Can I try a fly now? Like, yes, you can. So I think that's been a really good tool. And I think you're getting exposure to different gears and just a little more awareness of like what intensity you're running at. And I think that's super important. That ability to change gears in football is absolutely imperative. But then the other piece, like you were mentioning, is that I'm a huge fan of. We use this with our jumpers all the time. We call them sprint float sprints or ins and outs. So you're building up to let's just say top speed. You hit that window of speed for maybe 10 meters. Then you back off for maybe 20, where you're running at like 90% or 95%. And then you come back and you hit another 20-meter window of like top end. So the theory in it is that, and there's not much research because you can't really research this, because how can you know if somebody's really at like giving their 90% in that float phase?
Right.
But the argument is you hit that window of max speed to start, and then by kind of sort of backing off the accelerator a little bit, it's kind of like when the feeling that a car has when it gets you're in cruise control and you hit that velocity and you just kind of feel it cruise, That's kind of what you want in that float window. But the argument is in that float window that your nervous system has enough time to recover, so then you can hit another window of speed that is a little bit faster. So the advantage to that is I think you can get really, like we run those reps about 80 meters. So it's like a 30-meter build, a 10-meter sprint, a 20-meter float, a 20-meter sprint. But really you're getting like 50 meters of really quality upright sprinting with that component of changing gears. So I just think it's a really athletic thing. And I'm fortunate to have a lot of pretty cool equipment where we can measure to actually see what their velocity is throughout. I just started using that last year, and it was amazing. Like just in terms of like to see where exactly they were throughout that whole entire time. And most of the time they were hitting a faster speed in the float, which is when they were trying less. That's it. That's probably the case for like 80% of kids.
What tool were you using for that? Are you using like a GPS, or are you using timing system?
I have a Muscle Lab laser. So it is it's you actually put it either behind the athlete or in front of the athlete, and the laser is like shooting from behind them, so it's always on the athlete. So it's not like they're running through timing gates. It's the laser is always on.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
So it's like that. What's the other one that's similar? Like the Stalker radar gun is similar to that. Like they have an option there, but it's different in that the beam is always on them.
That's interesting. I actually, that's the first time I've ever heard of that. I didn't even. I'm sure it's on simplyfaster.com, by the way, or some version of it. Because I go on there, there's like 9,000 products on there that are, I'm like, go down a rabbit hole that it never ends. That I'm like, oh, I'd love to have that toy, but I can't. That toy is $10,000. But yeah, there's all kinds of great stuff on there. It's amazing the different tools. This is why I asked that question, because there are so many emerging tools that are out there that are starting to really help you measure some of those things that you want to know. Like you want to know where they are at, because obviously it helps them get to a high level. And that probably starts to explain a little bit like where you see, in Florida, Georgia, Texas, and probably California, I guess you were seeing guys actually able to go like sub 10. I don't know if anyone in California's gone sub 10. They've gone close, but I know, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. So I'm sure there's a level of starting to understand what the athletes can do that is different. That's helped. Obviously, I'm sure track shoes are better and better, and obviously surfaces are better and better. But it's interesting to see that. I think the knowledge base of each part of sprinting, acceleration, and reaching max speed, and then being able to hold your highest level of speed longer, are all kinds of things that are really being able to be measured now, which is really unique. It's in track of all the sports, because it's individual based primarily. Those technical elements are very important, because it especially when you're obviously you're competing, let's say at the state championship, and a couple of hundred separates you from being the champion or finishing second, right? Or a tenth could be the difference between you placing and not placing, in 100. So those technical elements help tremendously. I think it's really, really interesting. Is the I'm curious about like how you do like your peaking patterns with your sprinters or your acceleration based athletes, meaning like Tony talks a lot about the acceleration phase, obviously, and both Tony Holler and Tony Villani, I guess, talk about how obviously when you're not going that far, you can sprint a couple times a week, because you're not doing that many reps, and you're not creating the same level of stress. But when you're trying to really get like peak levels and being able to compete at the highest level, and trying to be the champion in track, let's say, or if you're a team that's trying to continue to improve throughout season in football, for example, where you want to peak at the championship, right? You want to be good. Obviously, you want to be able to get to the championship, but you want to set yourself up to where you could start to peak near those last couple of weeks, and the same thing in track. Where is there a backing off? Is there a backing off period? What are the loads looking like throughout the season for your athletes?
That's a great question. So if you would have asked me that 15 years ago, I would have told you I have every practice scripted before the season started, and there would be beautiful volumes, like in different intensities, kind of in a wave sort of pattern. And it was magic. Right. And then, and I think going through and doing that was immensely valuable for me. Like, I don't want to say that it was absolutely worthless. But like when I show up to a practice now, most of the time it's like I'm looking at like a card that looks like this. And it's just kind of different things that I've written down that have been based upon like what the weather is that day, how athletes performed in the previous practice, what they have coming up on that particular meet. So I'll have like individualized practice plans for our top end guys throughout, and it's just kind of day to day, and it's more in the moment. And I couldn't have done that 10 or 15 years ago, but now that I have a lot of experience, I can. But to kind of more directly answer your question, I would say the big thing for us when like our end of the season, our postseason is going, is to make sure that we just eliminate the noise from our programming. Like I think that there can at times we have some sort of noise sort of built in just to kind of cover certain aspects to make sure that our training isn't biased to one particular area. But I think we start to strip things away just to make sure that, we're just focused on that main thing. We're focusing on the athlete's strengths at that time. We don't really care about the weaknesses. We're going to try to accentuate the strengths. And it's very individualized. I have athletes who need to lift weights in order to feel great on the track. So I'm not going to pull that away from them because that's something that they feel they need. So we're going to make sure that we implement that smartly. There's other athletes who feel slower when they're lifting weights. So that's what I mean by the noise. Like an athlete who doesn't feel the need to lift weights during like a peaking session, we're still going to have them lift throughout the course of the season because we know that there's some benefits there. But then we're going to strip that away as we get into crunch time. So I'd say it's very individualized. I have some athletes who need quite a bit of volume. Like they feel the need in order for them to feel their best, they have to have a higher volume. I have other athletes who it's like 1 or 2 reps and that we're good, so it's very individualized.
You see, Rob, that's so interesting that you bring up that whole, some guys need more, some guys need less. We literally just had this conversation, I want to say either last week, Dave, or this week on a podcast where we were talking about how certain guys need certain things
yesterday
that are privy to, right, where they're privy, like that's where they're like they have to do certain things or reach certain volumes when it came to warm-ups, right? And I think we referenced Dak Prescott did, when the video went viral a couple of years ago with his hip exercises before a pregame and doing all that kind of stuff to get himself going. Now, whether it's a placebo effect and mentally or whatever, or physically actually does something, like I would love for you to touch on that a little bit more, even more so, like certain athletes having to do or wanting to do certain things. Because I think we even referenced the fact that like some guys had given him the data like, hey, that doesn't help you, right? But like when it comes to actual physical whatever, but for the mentally, it just put them in that quote zone for them to get ready, or they needed that to get ready. What's your stance on that, Rob? Have you seen anything like that in terms of your athletes?
Oh, absolutely. So first and foremost, I think the biggest barrier or the biggest strength of an athlete is where they're at in between their ears.
Yeah.
So like,
oh God, yeah.
I think we all feel like as coaches, like, we did this workout and I'm great at instructing the technique in this and whatever. But like when an athlete is like really feeling good about where they are at, like that's when you see those things that just happen where you're like, oh, damn, and I think it just in general, like we're all only like scratching the surface as our potential in humans in general. Like we really don't know what we're capable of. So anything that I can do to get an athlete's belief higher, I think is huge. So I've had athletes like a lot of times for warm-ups, I have like a scripted warm-up that I say, hey, this is something, that I would like you to do, but feel free to add anything into it. If there's something that you don't like on there, like let's talk about it. We can find an alternative. But like, I have athletes that want to like static stretch before a meet and like they feel the need, like I'm like, I don't think that's the best thing, right? And they know my feeling on it, but I don't tell them that they can't do it, right? If that's something that they feel the need to do, that's fine with me. But the negotiation I have with them is like, let's also just make sure that you're not just static stretching and then you're going on the runway and you're going to try to jump 24 feet. Like let's do some other things too, right? So I think it's just that constant conversation of like, yeah, you should absolutely do whatever you need to do in order to feel your best. I'm on board with that. At the end of the day, they need to be right in the head for sure.
That's a great point, and I think that it's funny because we just had that debate yesterday, and our guest, who is a great guest, and has phenomenal products that he does, and great coach, was and I asked the question, and Derek, I asked the question because I thought about, I brought up other people in the instances that I saw do things. But I thought about myself as an athlete, and I thought about what I needed to do to be prepared. Was not the same thing as like the guy next to me for him to play at his best, and wasn't the same as the other guy who was next to him. What he needed, like there were guys that when I played in college, we all started together. They were a linebacker, and I was a track guy in high school. I was a state champion hurdler. And, I grew up static stretching before I started going into my whole warm-up routine. Right. And that was what made me feel comfortable. Now I'm completely like, when I coach kids now, we never static stretch. Like we go right into our warm-up and we're moving right from the get-go. But when I was an athlete, it would have been too hard for me to shift and feel I wouldn't be able, if I started from when I was 10, it wouldn't have mattered. But I was doing it so long that this is what made me feel comfortable before I would get into a game. Now, there were other guys on my team that literally did zero of anything and literally spent most of their time making sure they looked pretty and rolled right out there and were balling out and moving fast. You know what I mean? So
that's how they did it.
What's that? Yeah, and
some
so
of those guys, buddy, those are the guys that used to piss you off though, because you're like, dude, this guy did nothing, and you know what? Like, he's still nasty. You know what I'm saying? Like, you used to have guys that literally would barely warm up, barely whatever, and
yeah,
like
they had a routine, but some of them had zero to do with movement. They had a routine with like getting their stuff ready. Right.
Their routine was like, hey, you got the eye black? Can I get the eye black? Okay, nice. We're good.
And
we're good.
I know when I did it, like there were like away games, for example. I home games, I always felt really good because I knew exactly my schedule. I knew away games, I knew everything was going to be accelerated, right? So I had to have a mental plan for that, and I would do it. But but it was different than my home game routine, which I always felt like great. I was like home game wise, I had that exact thing down to the minute, right? And I knew when I went out there, of course, my linebacker coach would then warm us up for 7,000 hours, and that would be right out the window. But which is a whole different crazy thing from the old days. Like we just played a game before the game,
Right, you'd warm up and be like, "Dude, this is ridiculous." Like I'm really having to do all that. Rob, we both come from small high schools, right? Like the small, the smallest level here. So we pretty much never left the field when it came to football. I mean, we did everything, whatever. And I can just remember in high school as an athlete, the pregame for me was insanity, right? Because it was receiver, DB, then I had to kick, punt, and return, both of them. I mean, and the coaches, hey, make sure you get reps at this, make sure you get reps at this. And that was before we even did any of our warm-ups. You know what I'm saying? It was like, holy shit, like I was shot before we even started, right? But you program yourself to do that kind of stuff. But with a lot of this stuff now that's really come out, it's like, hey, this is more, and that's a smart way to do it. But for some guys, they really just need to push that envelope in order for them to feel a certain way going into a game.
Yeah,
right.
Whatever.
Look,
and you can educate.
There are guys that needed to lift. You know what I'm saying? Some of those guys get a good
there is data on, especially for like you coach jumpers, right? There is data on lift, I would never have done it as a jumper in high school because it felt like I would have been taking away my legs. But there is data that like some level of strength development, strength movement before you go and jump and sprint can actually boost your times. Some of that stuff, I mean, I know there's science behind it all, and I agree with you. I think that, like, yes, there might be some science behind these things. There are some guys that if they do that, you just ruin their whole entire race. And then there are other guys that if you don't do it, you ruin their entire race, right? So or jumping event. And then obviously you probably try to coach them up saying, hey, like, all right, I know you want to, like you said, like, I know you like to stretch before, but you better do some movement stuff before you run down the runway and take off, to make sure that not just obviously you could jump at your farthest, but that you're going to be healthy and ready to go. Is like, do you feel like that your athletes come to you and ask you about these things, or do they more come to you and say, hey, this is what, we do from a training standpoint, and how you prepare yourself is how you prepare yourself?
I think that it's just, for me, it's building an individual relationship with the athlete, and exposing them to as many options. In Illinois, we have our track season starts in January, and we go through May. So we have 5 months together. Right. And I think, I'm giving them options throughout, like, there's different workouts that we do throughout the course of a week. Right. And and there's different items that are part of our like team warm up. And we want them to kind of take some ownership. So this is a conversation that I have with them. Like, hey, like, you have to kind of determine how you feel as you're doing these things, and build kind of like your own program in a way. And if they come to me with something like, like, Coach, what do you think about this? Obviously we're going to talk about that. And there's going to be certain things like that we're going to negotiate on, like, okay, well, you want to do this, but just make sure you also do this. And I think it's just an ongoing thing. And the other part of it too is like, we're going to do different things early on in the year, when the meets don't carry the weight, to kind of see how they respond, like, in performance the day after. So there could be times where I'll have them do certain lifts on a Friday with the meet on Saturday. We'll see how they do. There could be a certain workout that we'll run on Friday. We'll see how they respond on the Saturday meet early on in the season. In that way, when we get to that peaking part of the season, we have some data from the past to say, hey, remember when you did this workout on Friday into Saturday and you killed it? Well, we're gonna do something similar again. Is there enough data to really determine if that was the reason why they performed well? Probably not. But again, if it gives them that confidence that they're going to perform well, they probably will. So again, it kind of gets back to just how they're feeling about themselves between the ears.
Right. And it's like a funnel throughout the season as you start to get towards the end, where you're like doing more things, probably figuring out what works, what doesn't, and then kind of starting to get into your lane as you start to get to the important meets. And I know the facilities that you guys have are unbelievable. Unbelievable. I remember we looked it up. Did we talk to the football coach from there, Derek, from Homewood?
No, we talked to. Who did we talk to from there?
I thought we did. I remember looking up your facilities, which are.
Did you talk to Adam, maybe? Vogel?
Maybe. I feel like
that's who we talked to. We talked to Adam.
Yeah.
I'm not going insane, Rob. I'm not going insane because I remember looking up the facilities that you guys have, and I do believe, obviously you could do things without facilities, as long as you have certain things, but
always.
But it definitely it's pretty cool, especially since it's so cold. You know what I mean? In the winter in Illinois.
We talked to Adam back in May.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, he's awesome. He has taken, so he I don't know if he would say it, but when he took over as our PE health drivers ed chair, our strength and performance program, I think there were 3 sections. So this is like 3 or 4 years ago. There were 3 sections. Now there's over 20.
Wow.
It's insane.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, he's done incredible work. So him and obviously the teachers getting kids in that course, it's been huge. So they're doing incredible work.
It's I think it's really important stuff because Illinois and New Jersey are probably the last 2 states that require PE, I think, in America.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. I think those are the last 2 that are at the public school. Well, I guess.
Look, and Dave, how many times have we had this conversation about what PE is in general? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it ain't exactly what it used to be by any means.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I can walk into a phys ed class at our place, and it's like, what are we? You know what I mean? And you kind of just the places that have the structure, right? Like where they have even that option, because. This isn't like, especially in Jersey, it's not like Texas where your first blood of the day is football or a sport, right? That's not the case here. So even correct, right? Where sports, kind of are a focal point within the educational curriculum daily, right? So even those phys ed courses like, Dave, when I was out in Olive, right, in Morris County, like there was a section of, weightlifting or, an agility class where you sign up for that. And when you go to phys ed, like that's your block of time. You go to the weight room and you work out. And we would always ask our multi-sport guys to make sure that, hey, take that. So when you go to phys ed, you can still get your lift in or whatever it may be. The places like that have now focused on that and incorporating that into it, right? It's increased, obviously, the multi-sport guys because they can still get their workout in during the day and not have to, either wake up really early or, just find a window to hit it in within the other sport because they have practice and now they can't go to weight room after school or whatever. We've just seen those places kind of, go more to the top, right? It's just when it's a focal point within it itself, but for the most part, maybe it's roll out a ball and go nowadays in phys ed, right? There's no, any more physical fitness tests where you're timing miles or you're doing any of that type stuff. Like it's just really like how do I get my credits?
When I and I didn't end up becoming a phys ed teacher, but when I did my student teaching at Ridgewood in New Jersey, and that's where what's his name, who was the head football coach there for a million years, Chuck Johnson.
Where?
Chuck at Ridgewood. Yeah. So when I did my
legend,
yeah, this is a long time ago. But when I did it there, and then I ended up opening like training facilities. But when I did my student teaching there, Chuck Johnson had one of the reasons why their athletic department was so good was because they structured their PE program to really focus tremendously on. It was the first time I had ever heard like their thing was wellness, right? So athletes could go in and develop, within their block, be able to do the work that they needed to do. Regular students could focus on wellness courses to be able to general conditioning, general, health and fitness stuff. And they would. It was the first time I had seen, like they used to walk around with the polar. They would do the step up test and measured up. They would measure it and they would do it with every student that was in the fitness courses. That was like their pre and post assessment to see if they developed from a fitness standpoint. But it allowed them also to be able to Chuck really kind of push for it because it allowed him also to be able to not just obviously help the students, but his football players were in the program and he could really kind of start to measure them back way before. This was like, I did my student teaching in 2003. So this is really like, there wasn't a lot of that being done at that time. And I was so impressed by the program and what they were doing, but but that's a great example of what, what Adam's doing. Like, it's amazing because obviously it helps your student athletes, but it also helps the general student population as well be able to. And sometimes you end up getting athletes, believe it or not, out of that because kids who didn't play sport, they start working out and they start seeing gains.
And They start feeling that good. They start feeling good. They start getting that little, you know what I mean?
Maybe I can play maybe I could play a sport, maybe I can try this sport. And, track, I think you get a lot of athletes from that, standpoint, because very rarely before high school are a lot of kids running track unless they were in a middle school program. But the star junior track athlete, you probably know who that kid is from the time he's coming up. But the majority of your other track athletes are coming from some other sport, like my father,
right,
who track coach, he for girls, he used to recruit
Legend.
literally, what he recruited? Cheerleaders. You know why he recruited the cheerleaders? Because they did all the gymnastic stuff, and they were doing all the jumping and tumbling, and he needed jumpers. And those girls were his jumpers, and I coached some of them, and they were fantastic jumpers. They would always be and he would recruit the girls right out of cheerleading, and the cheerleaders a lot of times did not play any other sport. They really were cheerleaders from the time they were doing all the competition cheer and stuff. And he went over and said, "Hey, you're a good athlete. Like maybe you want He would do the whole thing. You don't have to worry about sprinting that much. You'll do now, and then backdoored them into the 100 to 200, basically down the line. But that's that's how you do find out about those athletes, because those girls actually lifted. I remember that they were actually lifting before they came up the track. Those girls were lifting because they wanted to help what they were doing with the tumbling and stuff. So I think it's really, really an important thing. It's very, very obviously where you're at. It's very valued, but it's even among the two states that are still doing PE, it's not as valued as much as it should be, because it really helps the overall the athletes be able to have more time for their sport, the students to be able to develop as a whole and physically. I'm curious about like when you have athletes that are multi-sport athletes, so kids that want to come out for track that are football players or basketball player, and that's their quote unquote secondary sport. How do you manage that in today's era? Because that's always a difficult thing for track coaches, I think, in general, because obviously that's your primary sport, and XYZ kid is coming over because he wants to get better for his sport. How do you manage? I've seen we've talked to a couple of track coaches that, they're guys that have guys that are really there for track, and they're the football players that are come out, they put them in a couple of meets here or there, and they're really there to work out. Some guys make them be a part of the regular program that everybody else is in.
Who was big on that? Who talked about that? Coach, when we had our coach from Grayson down in Georgia, right? He talked about how, even his fastest football players that had come out for track, right? Like they just came out and they were, football track guys. But on the other hand, like he had his guys that were, running meets in the fall, in the winter, and they're on, club track teams, and the just the difference in that aspect, right? Like I think, that was something that was extremely eye-opening, obviously, for me, one, because I've just never been in that world, right? And, two, it was eye-opening just to know that there's, that many kids out there that are going to be, that are that fast, that can do all those kind of things, to be like, hey, this guy doesn't really compete for us. He just comes out here, but, if he came up here to Jersey and did it, he'd probably be he'd be on the podium for the, the state finals. Sure.
Yeah. So I think really what it comes down to, this is the conversation we have with kids is, it's one of our standards, is just, can you communicate? If we have, I think probably the biggest one that we run into in terms of, like, there's not many conflicts in regards to football at our school anymore. So and then there's nothing, like there's no spring football, right? There's 7-on-7, but again, we encourage kids, like, if you communicate and you have a tournament or something like that, we can work around that as long as you let us know on the front end. And it's similar with like AAU basketball. That's probably the one that's harder to battle in general.
Yeah. Especially, I would say in your state too, right? Because I think Illinois is in comparison to Jersey, where hoops is a big deal.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it is, whether it be the AAU thing or just teams in general, like football, yeah, but basketball is a really big thing here that we compete with, and I would assume Illinois is a lot like that as well.
Yeah, there's no off season with basketball. Like there's zero. Right. It's high school season into AAU, back to summer for high school, back to AAU. Like it's ongoing. So that's the one that's the hardest, I think. And we've had some successes with kids who were in that boat. We've also been burned many times, and it really comes down to their ability to communicate and be upfront about how things are working. And we can work with kids for sure, but it really comes down to their ability to communicate on the front end. And sometimes it's not necessarily the kids that are the hard person to deal with. It's the parents, so
Right.
I mean, it just depends on that communication component from all three parties, I suppose.
No, that makes a ton of sense. It's always the development of the athletes, and when they come to you, and it's their quote unquote secondary sport. Although so many times I feel like having coached both football and track, Derek knows, the player that we had, like he ended up running track in college, and he was like a football player. That's what he was, but he was so good at track. I mean, long jumped 24 feet in high school, or 23 feet in high school. 23 feet, he went almost 25 feet in college. And he was a great 100-meter guy, great hurdler guy. But he was always like football first, and it wasn't until recruiting didn't go the way he wanted it to, because he was only 5'9", 150 pounds, and was really, he was skinny, but he was just a great football player. He scored 9,000 touchdowns, but he wasn't going to be able to go Division I for football, and he was able to go Division I for track, right? And so I think that's the great thing about what track is able to do. Like, how many times you get a basketball player, if they are committed, like, there's your high jumper. So, there's your triple jumper. I don't know if they do triple jump in Illinois or some state. There's your jumper. So, but those guys are really do, and they end up like, wow, this is I'm better at this sport than I am, basketball, or maybe not. You're better at it. You're more recruitable at it. Because basketball is so hard to play at the highest level, and even football, obviously, especially now, is so difficult to play at the highest level. You may have more success in another sport. So it's really, really interesting. And I think track is, like, to me, one of the, it's for football players, at least, it's a core athletic thing that they need to be able to develop in order to be, in most cases, a better football player. It doesn't have anything to do with their technical aspects of things like catching and throwing, but as far as their movements and speed and the feeling of acceleration, like the feeling of to know what max speed feels like, I think is a big deal. And a lot of athletes, football players, that are skilled players that don't run track or don't get it developed from that standpoint, even if they don't run track, don't know what that feeling is and what that gear is. And when you know you're going to another gear and everybody else is done accelerating, you just know you're scoring a touchdown, and it was one of the things that when you stop running track, which I didn't know until I was, in college, where you're just playing football only, like, you lose that. You it's very hard because you're training a certain way in track. It's very hard to develop it unless you're specifically doing it. But like I always said, like I've always felt like I was faster in high school than I was in college. College, they're more focused on trying to make us throw up. And I was like, this doesn't seem like this was serving a purpose. But they were more focused on trying to make us throw up, and that was a different time period than now. But I think all of those track principles are coming into sports like football, coming into sports like even basketball now more than ever. Definitely soccer, and I think those things are really really important because it's part of the development aspect of an athlete. Like track is the core development aspect of an athlete: sprinting, running, jumping. And those are, and being able to measure those things. Like that's, I don't think you ever played. Did you play an individual sport? You played all team sports, right, Derek? Or in high school, or?
Yeah, no, I was strictly. I was your traditionalist. I was football, basketball. Spring really wasn't a thing. I've told you this story before. Sophomore year, I had my defensive coordinator was the track coach, and he said, "Hey, you need to run track. We got to do some things." First day of practice, I'm like, "Sure, why not?" First day of practice, he made me run a 400, and I walked right off the track and said, "I'm never doing this again. This is." I came around that third turn, man, and my legs were moving, and I'm like, I'm out. This is bullshit.
I would have had you jump in the start, so you only have to go about 15 yards until backboard you into that. Like that's
the conversation of like, first off, even understanding what a 400.
I maybe did that, by the way, to start. Like that's the fastest way to get you out of track immediately.
Yeah. I was like, what? I was like, what's like? I had no idea. I'm like, I don't even know. I'm like, what's a 400? He's like, it's a lap, and I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, it's a lap. Like you got to run a lap, and I was like, oh, that's fine. You got to like. I was like, all right, well, give me a number as to like where I need to be, and he's like, if you want to win something, you need to be below 55 at the minimum. I'm like, oh, and here I am, like, oh, I got like no problem. You know what I mean? Like, come on, I got this. Like, dude, I'm telling you. I don't know what the time was, and I didn't finish anyway. I just went straight into the locker room, and I was like, I'm done. I ain't doing this shit, buddy. And he's like, yeah, well, maybe I did that one wrong. But look, we've talked about this a lot when it comes to that stuff, like irregardless, right? And whether however coaches, across the board trying to get guys into it and whatever, they always ask, like, if they're a track person, one, if they're not, hey, why doesn't he run track? Or two, if they do, well, what are his times, right? Because holding a stopwatch running a 40-yard dash is one thing, but a true track time and that level of competition where it's me and no one, you know what I mean? Like that just adds a bit of a different, guys go higher on the list getting recruited when it's, hey, I'm a track guy and these are my numbers, right? It's just a different, not only physical, sport, but mental when it comes to that one-on-one type of, it's just you. And if you get beat, you got nobody to blame it on but you, so, kind of like wrestling, same thing, right? Like it's not that team sport where you're relying on other guys for the most part. But I would have loved to do it, right? It just kind of wasn't a thing. And I didn't grow up around it. My old man didn't do it. You know what I mean? And if my dad didn't play it, then I didn't, I spent years trying to dodge the baseball bullet. Like I ain't trying to do that. You know what I'm saying? I'd be out there bored, like hit it to me, please. Right. Like it just wasn't a thing.
It's interesting because the with track that and you touched on it there, the time that you get that you run or the jump that you have is exactly what it is. There's no such thing, and there's direct, like you could give that time to a college coach and he'll know immediately where you fall based off of that time and or that jump. Like it's there's no doubt they know it now. Obviously, they got to watch the film to see if you're the kind of player that. But I could immediately, like, if a kid runs a 10.8 FAT in states like Illinois or New Jersey, that's different than running a 10.8 in Florida and Texas, where you can run you're outdoors. So that's a really good time in if you're a football player in New Jersey and in Illinois. But if you ran 10.8 in Florida, that really has to be like a 10.6 or below, because correlation of like winter versus because obviously you have more time to really get the develop.
And obviously,
Well, let me
since I've been working with you, Dave, like that's been a huge thing. Like you brought me into the room because I didn't know any of it.
Well, and to finish kind of the point is that like it's that core development of feeling of acceleration and the individual being able to track your times, to be able to track what you're doing, develops a confidence in where you're going as an athlete. Like when you're making progress from the work that you're putting in. That's the hardest thing about. By the way, there's all these great tools, obviously, to measure things now, so you could do it a lot better. But when you race against somebody or you jump against somebody, and there's another person that you're competing against, you can know, okay, I'm making progress here, and a college coach can literally just look at that and go, okay, wow, that lines up. Or it doesn't line up, like I've had kids, and you probably had this now too, Derek. I've had kids that are really good football players, and I was like, what did you run in? What was your 100-meter dash time in the spring? Oh, well, I start getting coach, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what was your time? And this is when I was no longer a coach of track, I was just a football coach. Head football coach, and they were like 11.6. I'm like, you're not a Division I football player. I don't know what to tell you, but like 11.6 is not a Division I football player. So you're running track.
Not gonna get it done, buddy.
You're training. And if you're not training and if you're not showing up for practice the way you should, and your time is that because of that, well, the coach is going to see that time. So my advice is, if you're out there running track, you should be at practice doing the things that you need to do, so that time is reflective of what your speed actually is, because an 11.6 is not a Division I football player. You're a Division III football player. So, just off of your speed. And those are things that like track does a great job of being able to help kids. I'm sure you know this when you've had football players and they want to play at certain levels, and or the football coach asks you, and you're like, hey, like he's running this, like he's got decent speed, but this guy over here is one of my top sprinters. He has Division I speed. I don't know if he's a Division I football player as far as his skills, but he's got Division I athleticism because of his speed or his jumping ability.
Yeah. I think I've seen this a lot where we've had in the past, like really good athletes in other sports, and you try to get them to come out for the team, and they're not willing to. And I think it's probably the one, like just that fear that they're not going to be the best. Which is a big thing. So it's just from that mental piece. But then I think they also they're kind of worried about the numbers that they're going to put up. Are they going to be good enough? So like that's where from a recruitability standpoint, like I would be attracted to the athlete who's willing to put themselves out there, right? Like that's I think and not shy away from that. Now, of course, the recruiter is not going to necessarily know, like if a kid chooses not to participate in another sport, that those are the reasons. But like when a kid does go out, right, and they're putting out performances, that is something that I would find attractive. Like, okay, like this kid's willing to put himself out there in an individual sport, and realize like everything's going to really come back to how their performance is based on them alone. And I think it's a totally different kind of mental game compared to being in a team sport. So I just think I think it provides a nice contrast, I guess, overall.
Absolutely. That was my favorite part about it as an athlete is that contrast. And I think that from a recruiting standpoint, I think one of the reasons why at the skill position level there's so many misses, it's basically like rolling the dice, is because obviously the roster numbers in football are lower than they were like in the in the 80s. You could stack up your roster and okay, you missed here or there, but they're going they're that buried down the depth chart. But now with like 105-man rosters and all those kind of things, you really can't afford to miss. But they are missing because a lot of kids, you don't know exactly what they run. And the laser timers are great. and all that stuff, but the track times off of a gun where everybody's in the same exact situation is the still, since whenever they started having electronic automated timing, FAT, it's the only true way to know exactly what somebody runs. That time, it doesn't lie. There's no way you could trick the laser. There's none of that stuff. And they're getting better with the lasers on how to like eliminate some of that. But there's nothing better than getting the FAT time, because you know exactly what that time is and exactly what that means. It's the same reason why, like, when people are like, oh, when someone does a vertical jump, right? Like, you know what? A vertical jump, if you're measuring it on a Vertec, a similar system to everybody else, then you know exactly what they're actually jumping, similar to if they're doing a long jump, right? It's the same kind of concept, that you have a measurement for how far out they are. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think in football there's so many misses, because you don't know exactly what these guys run, and then they come in there and you're like, oh, because when you're that good in high school, to me, it's like some of these guys are pretty fast, but they're so good at football relative to the competition. They look like they're unbelievable. And then they go to college where everybody's fast and everybody's big and everybody's athletic, and they're really not fast enough to be able to break into the open. And you see it almost like once you bring a guy in, that's why you see a lot of guys get run off within like a year, because you bring them in, you give them the ball a few times, or you throw them the ball and you see it, and they're like, whoa, there's an opportunity for a play there, and they get 3 yards. And a different guy with a similar situation goes and gains 8, 10, 12, maybe breaks it, right? And you realize, oh my goodness, this kid isn't that fast. And I think that's where track, and I think that's where you really are on to something with the max velocity thing. I mean, to me, it's always been that way, but the max velocity, what I love about what Tony's doing is he's stimulating these conversations. Like, he's stimulating these debates between what he believes, what you believe, what I believe, what Derek believes, and trying to figure out, who's right, who's wrong, who's on the right path, who might be off, and then learning from each other and figuring out like the best way to develop your own athletes, knowing that obviously, like what you said in the beginning, that it is still individualized, but the topic of max velocity, to me, is such an interesting thing, because it is so hard to measure when they reach that max velocity and what the sustainability of it is, because you're probably always trying to figure that out as a track coach. Like, you have a kid that's a 100-meter dash guy, and you think he's getting there, and then he doesn't get there, and then another kid gets there, and you're like, well, my one guy is 6'2". He should be able to hold it longer, and he doesn't. And then your 5'9" guy does, and I think that's what's really cool about this whole entire, industry, and what's really kind of being stimulated here from Tony and all the guys that are really doing that with the Football Track Consortium. I'll let you have the final word on, and any thoughts that you want to leave us with.
Just to kind of get into that max velocity conversation a little bit more.
Sure.
Something that was transformative for me, I think, and this was based off of a debate on acceleration versus max velocity. And I ended up writing a 3,000 word article on it. But like, the thing that it made me do, and this is why I think writing is great, was like I was like explaining, my thought process, and into that, like I started viewing sprints where athletes were hitting max velocity, instead of just saying it's like one rep of 40 meters. I was viewing every contact with the ground as a rep. So what I mean by that is, like, if you have athletes who are running just 20-meter sprints, they're likely going to hit maybe 95% of their max velocity at 20 meters. So maybe they're only getting one good quality contact that could be maybe specified at max velocity when they're hitting 20 meters. But if you go into a 30-meter sprint or a 40-meter sprint, they're hitting 5 steps at max velocity or 9 steps at maximum velocity. So from a rep standpoint, they're getting that many more quality contacts. So that's kind of a frame of mind that I've been in when I am kind of designing workouts, is like how many contacts at this specific entity max velocity they're getting. And I think that's been helpful because it's going to take them, around, when you look at it from a force perspective, it's going to take them about 13 to 14 steps to start hitting where they peak out on max ground reaction forces. So I think having that stimulus in there, one from just a training perspective, because it's unique from ground contact time, force time. I think that's unique from that standpoint. And then it's also just an injury preventative mechanism. I think viewing it from that lens has been very helpful for me. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I view it now.
Right. And then the do you also look at that as like where the juice first, worth the squeeze type element of that, like how often and how much you do it rep wise?
Yeah. So like from the private side of things, I train some football players, right? So and a lot of them aren't in a program where they're sprinting very much. Like for us at HF, every Monday, athletes in that strength and performance class they're sprinting in class. So like we know that they're getting that exposure, but that's not commonplace amongst all football programs. So like I'll have a kid that'll come in, he's a running back, and I'll say, how'd the game go? And he's like, well, I had 25 carries for 48 yards. Okay, so you probably didn't hit max velocity, right? No, he's like a 2 yards a carry.
Right.
That's what it was, right? It's like, okay, so for me as a guy that's training them, I know that I have to, like, assuming he's not totally beat up, right? I'm going to find a way to dose in some max velocity in that training session, just as sort of like a vaccine of sorts, right? That way, if in the next game, and this has happened, right? In the next game, he comes back the next day or, a day or two after, and he's like, yeah, I had 15 carries for 240 yards, right? So he had to hit those max velocity type, he had those runs. So, right, that session that we had was huge because, in my opinion, because it made him ready to be able to handle that stimulus and gameplay. So that's kind of like gets back to that individualization piece, right? And you can go like, a lot of programs are going GPS routes so they can monitor that kind of thing. And I think that's huge. And that allows you to make really good decisions in terms of load and how, their training stimulus should be impacted in weeks after.
Great point. Unbelievable stuff. Derek, do you have anything else?
Nah, man, that's awesome. I just get so excited when we get to talk to all these guys, and they're so willing. I love it. I really appreciate it. That's the one thing that, Dave, I think we've mentioned it numerous times, is that, like, guys are so willing to come on and open up and talk about all of these things. And, because just, it's like nobody's like keeping it like a secret as to how we can help or do things differently or look at things in a certain way. So I just always appreciate the openness and the willingness to kind of share some of these things, that maybe some guys haven't thought of or they don't, look at it that way. So it just helps all of us, our viewers and everything, because we, with the guys that we have on, everybody's just so willing to help everybody out, because at the end of the day, it's really about the kids and putting them in the best positions. But a lot of guys say that, but not many act on it. So, Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time, man.
Oh, I appreciate you having me on. And, I always say that, like, I'm really just hopeful, like, that anything that I say helps other people be less of an idiot than I was, because I made all the mistakes.
We all have. We all been there. You're not alone in that one, Coach. We've all been there.
No doubt about it. Well, Rob, it's been great having you on. Much continued success. I guess that Derek, you'll probably see Rob because you're going to be out. Are you going? You're going
December
right?
5th. Yep,
Yeah,
December 5th and
he's gonna be
6th,
out there,
out
so.
in right outside Chi.
Yep,
All
you'll
right,
be
okay.
able to meet you in person. So,
Yeah, that'll be awesome. Look forward
yep,
to it.
absolutely. Much continued success, and then maybe you guys could do some sort of you should talk to Tony about doing maybe some sort of like little offshoot interviews or something there, Derek. I don't know.
That's right. Tony Villani was all over it. He's like, make sure you bring your podcast stuff, buddy, because you're gonna have every opportunity. I think who else said it? Kula, I think, said it too.
Cool, yeah. No doubt.
Cool.
Everybody will be at the same place. So
You'll get all one-stop shopping, buddy.
yeah, that's it. That's it. All right, Rob. Well, listen, have a great night and enjoy yourself. And we will see you real soon. Thanks so much for coming on.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Thanks, Coach.
That was great. I mean, that was a really good topic, like max velocity, because it's
acceleration versus. I like the acceleration conversation, right?
Yeah, we don't talk about
what the max velocity versus what the max velocity itself, or versus the acceleration phase. I think right. I just think that overall outlook, right? And first off, when we say that stuff, like most people have no idea what we're about. You know,
this was a little more.
You're like, wait, what?
This was definitely a little more.
But technical. I love that.
Yeah,
that's how you know. Like, but guys can also like write it in crayon. You know what I'm saying? Like when I like they can break it down to someone that has no idea what we're talking about, and then that's to me that's the sign of someone who really knows what they're talking about. Is they can get really technical. Like for you when you start asking certain questions, right? Because you've dove down these rabbit holes and you've been in the done that type of stuff, right? Or they could like, talk to somebody like me and be like, buddy, this is when you do this. And it's like, oh, okay, I get it. You know what I mean? So our viewers, they get kind of both sides of it when it comes to when we talk to some of these guys that do take it a little more technical or more, in depth when it comes to it. But at the end of it, it's like you leave with that understanding of like, all right, I get what they're talking about, right? Like, and now I'm going to go implement it or I'm going to go do it, right? But it's a cool conversation when you start talking about that stuff, especially when you put it into, your own sport context. You know what I'm saying? Like for him to take it from track and put it in football world or basketball world or soccer, whatever it is, to take that whole conversation and be able to relate it to the sport specific, that takes it to a whole different level.
What's interesting about so I just think about when someone the acceleration part, what was the reason why I asked him about like does he do stuff with like change of speeds and so when my father was big on this thing he called it accelerations, which is kind of like his what did he call it crescendo training. Okay.
Yeah, crescendo sprint, right? Where you're like a build up, right?
Yeah,
like you're
right.
75, to the 20, and then right. Deceleration, you said?
He used to call them accelerations. So basically,
right.
And he didn't talk about that, but so it's one of the things that my father's done with his sprinters. He always had great sprinters and girls, guys, and he does this. And one day I was working out Troy, and he's like, you need to do this. Like, if you want him to get faster, this is how you have to do it. And but it's basically it's changing of speeds. That's one part of it. But then there's a continued lifting and driving to drive acceleration, which I always thought was interesting because they used to say ground times, like long ground times, was the enemy of speed. Okay. But what
right, like the time you spent with your foot on the track or the turf, right? That's like the longer it was there, the slower you were, correct?
Right. That's what they thought. Okay.
Right.
But what
I remember that. I think I heard that at Parisi.
Right. But what they've learned, which is it's actually incorrect. So if you watch do this on your own time, you'll be amazed. Okay. So Usain Bolt's the easy one to look at for this, okay? But there's a lot of there's a couple of other elite sprinters that are similar to Usain Bolt. They're not quite as fast as he was, but similar camp. And then there's another camp of guys that are not touching the ground as long, but these big, strong, powerful guys like Usain Bolt. Okay, there's a guy named Kenny Bednarek who's enormous for a sprinter, like looks like a linebacker, honestly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you'd say to yourself, how could that guy run that fast? You know what I mean? He must be near 200 pounds. Okay. Wouldn't that work against him? Well, what they found was if you're ever able to generate an extreme amount of force with higher ground contact times, you're actually able to go farther down the track with your power. So you can actually run faster. Okay.
That being said, does shoe size matter?
I don't know. I'm not sure, but I know that power from your foot, right, and your muscles, right, that enable you to drive down the track allows people with higher ground contact times, like Usain Bolt is the example, right? He's so big. He's 200 pounds, 6'5". Right. He literally looks like a tight end. You know what I'm saying? Like, the only reason he's not if it was
so fast.
If he was in America, he would be a tight end, right? He would be 6'5", 230, right? They would have made him a football player. So, but he was in Jamaica, so
he just can't afford the equipment in Jamaica.
Became a track guy. But it's one of those things that his high ground contact times. In Old War, they didn't make sense. It wouldn't have made sense to people that a big guy like that, he's so powerful in his stride, and he's gained so much ground, and the way that he uses his body. If you watch him sprint, it almost looks like he's running side to side. And the old days, be like, that's not good. No, but they found out that like sprinting is like it's kind of like this circular motion, and that he's actually more efficient, right? It's you're going like this, right? So elliptical motion, I think it is, not circular, elliptical. So it's that motion, and your muscles, and they orbit around the spine. You know what I'm saying? Like they're orbiting around the spine. So
right.
What's interesting about that is, like, with max acceleration, guys like Bo Jackson is a good example of this, or Herschel Walker, or Marcus Dupree, or Eric Dickerson.
I knew you were gonna bring up Marcus. I knew it. I was waiting for it.
You watch them run, you're like, they don't look like they're moving that fast, right?
Who else was like that? Did you say Eric Dickerson? That was the first guy I ever. Even OJ Simpson.
Even OJ Simpson, right? OJ Simpson was a 10-0 100 guy. Okay, same thing.
But the other one, Marcus Allen.
Marcus Allen, yep. And all of them were track guys. Marcus Allen was considered slower among all those guys.
The thing that stands out about
Roger Craig.
When you look at those guys, it look like they're flying, but it don't look like they're. You know what I mean? It looks like they're ghosting.
Because they generate so much force, and their power in their strides, and they gain ground, and they know the feeling of max acceleration. Where and Tony Dorsett would be a shorter version of that, right? So it's not just the big tall guys. Tony Dorsett is only 5'10", right? Tony Dorsett was a track guy. When you watch Tony Dorsett run, he just looks like he's gliding, dude. He's only like 5. Watch the old stuff. The man's gliding. He's like 5'9", 5'10", and his strides are enormous, and his power is enormous. But he turns it over too. It's not like they don't have turnover. They turn it over, but they're so powerful. And kind of Usain Bolt really brought to light what people didn't really understand about with, like,
remember,
but
Adrian Peterson.
Yes, right.
10-2 in the 100 in high school.
That's my point. Right. You look at Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, I think, was 10-6, 10-7. Which for Florida probably considered not quite as fast, but but
10:19, he said, was his fastest. He ran a 21:23 200 meter and a 47.64.
Deion Sanders. He doesn't look. He just looks like he's gliding, right? He's not
The one that always,
middle.
the one that always, like, when it comes to like football track, like, just because they've obviously, with the documentaries and things, they've made a bigger deal out of it, was like Santana Moss going to the University of Miami on a track scholarship, but like, he could really run track, guys. This wasn't like some smoke and mirror type thing. Like, he
was a bullet. That Miami 4x1 team was unbelievable back then when those guys were together. And there was all track guys. It was all football players. I'm sorry, all football players. And so,
holy dude.
But that the max acceleration, which for the 40-yard dash, okay, when you're just training for the 40, and if you don't reach it until that last 10 yards, but or you don't start to reach it maybe till those last 10 yards or the last 5 yards, but it's and they say, oh, it's not needed in football, but I do think that there's something to it. Now, one thing I'd love to talk to somebody about in the future, and I don't know if there's any guy like this. So this is a challenge, maybe because you're booked out. We're booked out till like January or whatever. But for the new year, is there a guy that feels that max acceleration sacrifices the ability to do quick change of direction? Meaning, if you develop max acceleration skills like Bo Jackson, Adrian Peterson, those guys.
What is it? What did you say? Max acceleration?
Right. There's a focus towards max acceleration, meaning a guy becoming his highest speed. Is that if you develop more?
If you develop more, basically, if you develop more acceleration, does it inhibit your what?
Ability to have quick ground, like the quickness necessary to do the football-based acceleration, meaning change of direction quickly. Those things necessary for quick acceleration, right? That's the one thing I would. There's probably almost nothing on there about it.
So,
but
all right,
if you
let me just make sure I got it.
Skills, guys are either the Randy Moss, right? Like big stride and super fast. You know, Randy Moss was a 10, 500 meter dash guy, 20, right? Or they're the what's the guy from the Wes Welker? Okay, they're like the Wes Welker, right? Great acceleration. Now Wes Welker probably
gonna get caught. Yeah. Right. So you're asking, say, does a focus on max acceleration hinder the quickness necessary to, like, is that what we're talking about?
To get the game.
Does it focus on max acceleration hinder the quickness necessary
to be quick acceleration? Like that's because if you know, like, I'll use you and me example. Okay, if I were to watch film on you, you probably have a lot of quick acceleration. All right. If you and I'm talking,
but not max acceleration.
I'm not talking about like college because we're playing different positions, but like where you were playing your offensive skill position, right? And if you watch film on me, you would watch me run, and you would be like if I hit the edge, you're just like, oh well, that's a touchdown, right? Like so,
right. Whereas like that wasn't it for me.
But in tight space, though, you would probably be better in tight space. Okay. In tight space, I was good. It wasn't like I could change direction good. I was real good with the 1-2 cut, but I would not have been able to do a 1-2-3-4. Like that wasn't who I was a great one cut, a 1-2 cut, but you weren't going to get that footwork super quick. Now, if you watch me do footwork like ladder drills, I would look great on those things. But I'm saying like in the gameplay, you know what I mean? In the gameplay, like because I would have higher ground contact times because I'm bigger and probably what would you call it? Like more powerful, in my sprinting, and you were quicker and more lower ground contact times and more, what's the word? Like, I don't know what the word would be, but like faster acceleration in between tight spaces, right?
Right.
You
So
can get
yeah.
You
So
can
I
get
think
your
I got
feet
it.
up and down quicker. You can get your
Right.
feet up and down quicker than I could, right? So
Right.
even
Yeah,
if
in
we,
a
if
short
we did
space, like
ladder drills,
within
we
a
might
like
look
a
the
like a
same.
10-yard box. Correct.
Right. We might look the same, but if you put us in gameplay, it would not.
Or like here, like let's say for this like instance, right? Like we set up a box, like we set up a 10, 10 by 10 box, right? Hey, we got to make the guy miss, right? Like I'm probably gonna make a miss more than you would, but if we expand that box and make it 20 yards, you're gonna run around this guy or you're gonna run right by him. You know what I'm saying?
My
Like
one
that
cut would be more effective. My one cut would be more effective
and gone.
because
Whereas I
yeah,
gotta hit like 2. I think the best way to look at it, Dave, is like, look, you were more of a kick returner. I was more of a punt returner.
Right. Even though I was very effective in punt return in that, like you would be really effective. I'm just visualizing you without ever watching. Guys running at you, multiple guys, you would make them all miss, and people would be like, this is like magic, how Derek would get out of there. Okay. They would, if I was in that position, I would need I would be really good if there was one guy coming at me, I'd make him miss and be a touchdown. But if there were 2 or 3 guys coming at me, like my choice would just be to put my foot in the ground and get forward, right? Because you might be able to make all of them miss because of the way that your style of quick acceleration. I couldn't get to that level of acceleration in a tight space, and a bigger guy. Now, by the way, for running back position, there are guys that are Adrian Peterson, very effective, big, similar guy but faster than me, obviously, but that same style. Then there are guys like I'm trying to think of a running back in the NFL, like what's his face from Rutgers?
Monungai?
Well, Monungai would be an example of that, but he's more bowling ballish. The guy who Pacheco, really, like the feet are moving so fast,
violent,
right? Like,
right.
I mean, so fast, dude. So he's up to speed in a quick space, so quick. Like when he was at his, when he was in his prime. I mean, he's probably getting a little bit older now, but like when he was in his prime. And Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders is a perfect example of that. Barry Sanders versus Bo Jackson, right? Bo Jackson is going to outrun you.
Look,
Barry Sanders is going to make you miss, and he gets caught at the 1. Now obviously in high school he never get caught, but like relative
like
to the level.
like I always look at like a Devin Hester who was a phenomenal returner, right? And was also like Devin Hester, right? Like very fast, but like then you look at it, and I always like a Dante Hall from the Chiefs, like he'll make you miss in a phone booth. You know what I'm saying? Like. Right. Whereas even Devin Hester was more of a lateral movement type of beat to the edge guy,
So was Dion. He was more a sprinter. Like
same thing, right? Like same thing.
He wasn't like making you miss at a phone booth, but if he got a step, I mean, it was 6 points. Right.
It's why, even like his, playing corner, if he gets beat deep, he's gonna catch up,
Like, I wonder if now it could be body type, right? Body type might dictate.
I'm sure that plays a role.
I'm sure.
Whereas I think the smaller, compact type of dudes can wiggle a little bit different. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Well, and my point was, who wasn't like that? So Tony Dorsett, you would think was a wiggle guy because he wasn't that tall, but he wasn't. He was a sprinter guy. Let's
think about like some of the guys that running back wise, like you grew. Here's a good one. Curtis Martin. Warwick Dunn.
Emmitt Smith.
Emmitt Smith was by standard slow.
Yeah, right. But in his
in that box for 10, 15 yards, you know what I'm saying? Like that's why you see I don't know. Some of those older highlights with running backs like that, Dave, like you see them, they make the line miss, they make a backer miss, they break out into the open field, and just as they hit as they're getting into the end zone, here comes a corner or a DB. Right? Like
Right.
guys that blow out, like you don't even see those DBs in the picture.
Emmett probably doesn't even like. I'm sure he's reaching max acceleration, but he really doesn't have max acceleration. Like Emmett didn't, Walter Payton didn't have max
There's another one.
acceleration. He got caught all the time, right?
Look,
Now,
I don't know if Jonathan Taylor right now is the,
Well,
is
he
that
was-
much of like a quote unquote burner.
at one time he was more of it. Like he's starting to get older and a little heavier, but he did have.
Dude,
He was kind of a guy.
He's leading the league right now.
He was close to have. He's close to having both. He's close to having.
Too.
He's the closest I would see that like is balanced. Like, can accelerate, but also has like the ability.
Look at like change position a little bit, Dave. Right? Like look at receivers like Puka Nacua. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't put him on like, hey, he's a burner. Now Justin Jefferson, I'd say he's a burner.
Right. And I think when they get OBJ would be one of the few guys that I would have thought is definitely could do both, right? Super accelerate, like could get max speed and could change direction. But you know what was interesting about his career? And
Christian McCaffrey, I don't think he's a burner.
He's both. Those two are both. But you know what's interesting? There is like a wear and tear that happened. So Odell being able to do both started to have a crazy like injuries. Those guys are unique. They're right. There's very few Odells, very few McCaffreys who could make moves in a phone booth pretty well and max acceleration incredibly high, like track guys and quick guys. There's not. I would love to know. I'd love to see. Obviously, well, McCaffrey trains with Kula, right? Or did?
Yeah. No, he does. Kula was up here last week for the Giants game.
And OBJ used to go to. I don't know if he does anymore, but he used to go to. He was a track kid. His mother's was a track coach.
His mom. Look, let me tell you something. When I met him, I think it was probably 2015, 2016, something like that, buddy. His mom looked like she could still go out there and win a 400. Like, holy shit.
Tremendous track athlete. Yeah, she was
LSU, obviously. Like, LSU has phenomenal track, correct?
Yes, and she was I don't know, hurdler, sprinter, I'm not sure, but like, and his father was
you bring that up, like, and hurdles, like that whole aspect of adding that stuff into it. Now you're talking about ground force in jumping and then hitting and going and all that kind of stuff. Look, I was fortunate enough to be, to teach at Mount Olive, where the boys had a really, really good track program and whatnot. And, when I was just getting there, they had Katura Orja, who ended up going to Georgia, right? And she was a triple jumper. But that was the most insane shit I have ever seen in my life, was watching her like work out and do the triple jump stuff. Because obviously, like, we've talked about it. I'm not from the track world. So right. I was like, triple jump, like, what is that? And like to watch that, but holy shit, dude. I was just in awe of everything that went into that aspect of it. And I got to see like one of the best do it. I mean, she was unbelievable, dude. How fast her foot hit and came off, and then the power to like go.
So like,
she was like pausing in midair, dude, as she went. Like
to me, there was no coincidence that like that when I my very first year of coaching track and football, Miles Austin was a senior.
Oh, stud.
And I saw him because we had good jumpers in Saddleburg, and Garfield obviously was in our league back then.
Bergen County. And
Miles, who I don't even know how much he trained, I watched Miles Austin jump in the Bergen Meet of Champs, 22-11 in the long jump. Okay. And he jumped 22-11, and he's a big dude. He probably weighed 190.
Dude, he's a monster. Well, he was a lot bigger back then too, man. Because look, when I played him at Sacred Heart, and he looked like a tight end. And then he got with the Cowboys, and then all of a sudden he became like this lean, like, don't get me wrong, he was still like big, thick, but that was like right where you started to see receivers really become like the AJ Browns, right? Where these guys are fucking monsters out there, dude. But they're running like T.O. Terrell Owens, I think, was like the guy that really took that big
Megatron.
wide out.
Megatron.
But even I look at him and I don't look at it like, I think like when it comes to like speed and all that, like I never looked at like Megatron as like a, you know what I'm saying, like a burn.
Actually, the guy who I think was really first. Well, if you go back, you're on for it. Megatron and T.O. made it mainstream. They made it mainstream. But
right.
if you go back to like,
I got a good one for you that you're not gonna remember, but I'm just telling you, he was the first guy as a kid. I remember being
Michael
like, yo,
Irvin, what was Michael Irvin and who's the guy whose his other side was Harper? They were both big in Dallas. Like they were
ready for this name? You ready for this one? Oronde
Gadsden
Gadsden with the Miami Dolphins.
He was big.
Monster. His son right now is having a hell of a year. He played for Mike. This kid went to Syracuse as like a tight end, more of a Jimmy Graham-ish. Now he's doing great things for the Chargers. Dude, when I say, like, look, people talk about me gaining weight after my career. When I saw Gadsden after his career, my man was O-line and some. But I'm just saying, he's also in 6'6". That was the first time I ever saw a receiver of that size, like, be able to move like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's no doubt.
And that's when the Dolphins had like Chris Chambers, right? Who was a real long.
He was big too.
Yep.
Chris Chambers originally owned one of those speed facilities that
Wisconsin.
I used to send guys to, and then
wow,
but that
maybe I'm wrong.
ended up merging with Tony Villani. And the merging with
right.
Yeah,
because that's like that. Listen, Tony making his, you know what I mean? Like Tony making the move down to Florida, I think was big for him.
Oh, where was he from originally? Was it Florida? Always?
No, he was like, I want to say like a I thought he was like an Ohio guy.
There used to be a great speed guy in Ohio, and he ended up being he ended up taking a job as a strength and conditioning coach for a university. I used to send guys to, and then, you know,
I think that's what Mike's gonna track to do, buddy.
Well, when you go into that, when you represent players in the NFL and you see the speed, like, so the big, actually, this is a guy you should get on. He'll probably come on if you want to bring him on. Oh my God, I can't believe it just slipped my mind. He trains as many guys as Tony Villani he might have more than for the NFL. It's his name is, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot his name. He's the guy what's the big agent? He sends all his guys to him.
What's Rosenhaus?
Rose guys, I'll tell you in a second. Hold on. Speed training, Miami, Florida. See if I can find it. I'm not sure if it's Miami or Boca Raton.
You know what? I think it's interesting to see, like, Tony. I don't know. It's just interesting to see, like, you know, what these guys do in terms of, you know what I mean? Like, it's no different than high school, right?
Bomarito.
These guys.
Bomarito.
Oh, okay. These guys
write that name down.
Season.
You want to get him in?
What is
Pete
it?
Bomarito. Pete Bomarito. He's probably Tony's. He's probably Tony's competitor for a lot of good players. They're different.
Bomarito.
Pete Bomarito. He's kind of the
Davie, Florida. Go figure.
He's kind of the Parisi of.
Listen,
combine.
You can pay $259 now and take an online course and get Parisi certified.
Yeah, that sounds
I'm
Bomber
sure it helps.
performances featured on ESPN.
Oh yeah, he was
baseball guys. Look, I thought that the guy when we the coach from Miami baseball and the strength stuff, I thought that was eye opening, right? I just think that these guys. And my thing is this: like, what I was trying to get to was like, these guys they all play in the NFL. They all have off season programs within their teams themselves, right? Like, just like in high school, right? Like, hey, you got to go and do our workouts. If you want to go to Parisi after, that's on you, right? So these NFL guys do the same shit. Like, they go and they got to do whatever the team tells them to do. And then, but I wonder how much.
I don't think the NFL
do you like. You don't think that? You don't think like they have to be around the facility in the off season or a certain amount of days or whatever?
In your contract, you have to show up to certain number of off-season workouts. It's literally a bare. It is like
the bare minimum.
Yeah, because I think the reason why it is a bare minimum because I think a lot of these guys have people they in the off.
That was my question. Like, I wonder how much back and forth it is. Like, hey, I'm the Giants strength and conditioning guy, and I want you in this, but you're like, dude, I'm Malik Neighbors. Like, I ain't doing that. Like, I'm going to my guy. So, like, how much? I wonder what that's like. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't think they're doing whatever their contract says they can and can't do. And my guess is the top guy. That like my guys were like, hey, they had to do whatever. But it was such a bare minimum. Even my guys went to their own. They went to their own guys in the offseason.
So would you be on board, or would you go along with the whole thought process of like, hey, if you're the strength and conditioning coach for the Patriots, right? In comparison to the strength and conditioning coach for the University of Texas, like the strength and conditioning coach at Texas matters more than the strength and conditioning coach than in the NFL.
Way better job, in my opinion. Way better job. Much more respect.
That's what I was going to say. I don't even think it's a question. Like, just based on time alone, college strength and conditioning coaches spend more time with players than you know what I mean? Like, you literally are. If you're not. We know recruiting is one, but your strength and conditioning program and off-season workout stuff, that's number 2 in terms of like success. Like, you got to recruit and you got to have a great guy. And there's a huge thing right now with Rutgers because so many guys are hurt. And I'm not talking like out for the season, buddy. That's why what's his name is gone.
Listen, let me tell you something.
That's why he got rid of his buddy.
So yes. And he's a smart guy. So the bottom line is that you have to keep them fresh. You've got to keep them. I wanted to give you another guy. This is a baseball guy, by the way, but he does football quarterbacks. I think from a development is. You ever heard of Tom House?
Yeah. He's a pretty prominent name, no?
Yeah. He's doing all kinds of stuff on social media now. I think he would. I think he'd be a good guy to talk to. Tom House is like. I mean, he works for young kids too, by the way. Even though he works with pros.
It's crazy.
He obviously, in that industry, unless you're working for a team full time where you're getting paid there, if you're an independent guy, like you have a business, like you're still going to work with younger, what I'm saying, teenagers and stuff because, like,
of course, that's like your true like.
That's where your steady income is. You know what I mean? Like, you might work with so-and-so might give you $50,000 for a month, but like you're still doing other stuff for year round.
Southern Cal guy.
Yeah, Tom House is definitely California. But yeah, so I think that's. I think that the whole that aspect is really, really important in college football because if you are overtaxing them. And you're not getting because transferring is such a big problem, right? So
you want to work me that much or whatever, like I'm out. See ya.
It's
I can go here and do this. Like I don't. Plus, I think there's a lot.
There's parents are going to ask the question too because
That's what I was going to
They
say.
can go watch this podcast and see all the people we have on. You don't think that parents who are either former athletes, because there's a lot more former athletes. I'm not even talking about them being pros. I mean, like guys like us played in college. Maybe they have a kid. They're developing them. What is this? Is what they're doing? You know, is what that guy doing? Like good?
Parents,
You know?
listen, it's just like our players questioning us now. What we're doing. Well, coach, why are we doing this? Like, shouldn't we? Because the access to other things, they can go find it. They can go see it. It's all mainstream social media stuff, dude. This stuff, look at one video, and your algorithm now is sending you to every freaking, workout or whatever it is, dude. Like, it's there.
The training aspect, and the development aspect, and how you develop athletes, and and what you do with them, the purposefulness and the measurement aspect. Like I'm trying to measure as much as I can, not because of performance, okay, even though performance becomes the element to it, because I want to know, is this too much? Because my kid has Severs, right? So I actually now have to monitor what I do with him, right? So he's got to work out. He's got to be able to play his sport. But all right, what is this load level? Do we need to go to therapy today? Like, and it's crazy. It's super expensive, by the way, all this stuff. But it's
listen, come on, dude. Like, you just keep reminding me that
But you know what?
the other one's on the way, bud.
You know what it is? It's like what I realized, and I didn't realize it a year ago. Okay, just a year ago, even though we were already talking to guys like talk. But what I didn't realize was you got to like figure out like what these loads are and what other people are doing in practice. Like when we're at our I don't know, our travel practice, I'm an assistant coach. I could see the load that the head coach is putting on them. I know what he's doing. Okay, it's really.
Now you have to take that into account when you go and take him and you kind of do your own
when
thing.
he's
Look, it's the same thing. Like if a guy comes and works out for us, right? Like guy comes and he does our weight room, and then all of a sudden he goes to one of these gyms or whatever and goes and works with a trainer, and then he burns himself out on that doing that. And it's like, dude, you did squats already, and now you're gonna go do it. You know what I mean? Like you have to be aware of these things, man. Like that's why I tell these guys, like, look, when you're going, make sure you say, hey, coach, this is my workout that I'm doing this week for my high school team. Here's what we now, because you could be.
Says, this hurts. This hurts. This is one thing that high school coaches have to be aware of. You're probably very aware of it now because of all this stuff we do.
I'm hyper aware of this shit, dude.
Like
I'm all over this shit, bro.
Like I'm very aware. Like when a kid says to me, like when I'm coaching, this is bothering me. Okay, what's bothering you? What activity bothers? Does running bother? Okay, don't do that. Just don't do it. Like
right
when I have
shut it down.
If my kid if I'm gonna have him lifting, like we do, very lightweight, but hex bar deadlifts, and if he goes to do it, and he's saying like, hey, my back is sore. I said, well, why is your back sore? And it was from something he did in practice. Okay, and nothing to do with anything lifting wise. I said, we're not doing that. Then that's it. Like. Let's do.
Right.
Let's.
Yeah, there's no need for a question here, bud. Like,
yeah, there's no. Like, that hurts. Oh, why is it hurt? Well, this is what, because I'm like, we didn't lift this, So, so you do something else that is okay, and that's important for high school coaches to be able to do with their athletes. Obviously, strength and conditioning coaches, but like I just think about like strength and conditioning coaches and high school coaches, I have to get out of the mode that like
we're making them puke.
Yes, when a kid says he's hurting, and I'm not talking about like when a kid says he's hurting.
Don't
you
say
run
he's
him-
soft.
Yeah, it's not. It at the end of practice, dude. I listen. This year football, and we had a great year, and we kept getting better. Let me tell you something. We might have done a few, like we would do every once in a while. We do like these like 5 yard hills at the end of practice because the
Well,
kids like to pull down it. But I never.
I was going to bring that up too. I thought that was
I
really
just,
cool
you
that
know,
he brought that up. That he said any sprints you do on a hill
yeah,
or some
yeah.
type of incline, right?
So I didn't do any.
That was a staple for us in high
practice.
school, dude.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
That's how we start. That's how we started receiver group. We started every individual receiver period for my 4 years of high school with like a hill at Butler that was there, and it was like, all right, here you go, stance, start, boom, up the hill, stance, start, boom, up the hill, like that, dude, for 4 years.
That's how you
to a point where when I got to Sacred Heart, I was like, hill, like I need to find a hill because that was my like I needed to. Yeah, dude,
like, that's how you
it was awesome.
Sprint. But I think that and those things are at the beginning of practice, not at the end to torture them. Okay, and
no,
and it's very it's guys have to athletic directors when they hire have to know what these guys are doing and for what reasons, and it's not you know, I don't have a huge issue with a couple of 5 or 10 yard sprints at the end. Like I know the what do you call it? Those guys don't believe in it, but I don't have a big what I really have the big issue is like, you know, 100 yard suicide type things. You know, like those just don't make sense. You know,
I just
like
think these things that some of these guys, it's so much. Again, back to the whole like you coach the way you were coached or whatever that shit is, dude. Like I'm just the whole I just it's so I'm just still in awe again of with how much information is out there and like how easy it is to attain, how still so many of these guys are just like fucking clueless when it comes to
AYF
shit.
AYF has a mandatory conditioning week. That's the dumbest thing in the history of stupidity. Okay, you know what?
Can't
You know
make
what
it
that
up.
signals to youth coaches, okay, who don't really know, like, and not nor should they. By the way, they're mostly dads, right? You know, are just trying to put a program together. They're just thinking, run my kids to death for 3 days. You know what I mean? Like, that is stupid. That like you should have a guideline that says, okay, day 1, you can do this, this, and this. Day 2, you could do this, this, and this. Day 3, you could do this, this, and this.
Like key acclamation.
Yeah, but this would be sport acclamation, right? Like
I know, I'm just saying. It's
but
like
everybody
in
else
comparison to that.
they just end up running them 1,000,000 sprints and they haven't done anything. Like they haven't done stuff. Also, like that's the dumbest. It's so dumb, Derek. It's so dumb, and I see it, and I'm just like, you know, like, does anyone have access to the internet to know that this is stupidity? Like,
Absolute
it's just
idiots.
stupidity.
Idiots.
It's stupidity. It's stupidity.
It's actually kind of scares me a little too, because it's almost like what's the word I'm looking for? Negligent.
It is negligent. It
You
is.
know, like
You build up.
if somebody wanted to look this, like you can't, dude. Guys would be like arrested.
Listen, I've already. I don't want to say names because we could play for some of these things, but like first day, like you're gonna get them in shape. No, they're either in shape or they aren't in shape. Okay, and if they were picked for a team, if your goal is to get them in better condition, you do progression. You do progression.
Yeah.
Day 1, a couple of sprints. Day 2, maybe a couple of a little bit longer sprints. Day 3, a down and back. A couple of those. You know, I do not understand it. Like, would you? It's just like, listen. let's use your track coach, who you probably love as a football coach. He told you to run 400 meters the first day you came to practice. You now know that is completely idiotic. Okay, he probably wouldn't do that anymore. Okay,
Hell no.
right, but that's the time it was. Like that's what people did. I mean, I did stupid shit too all the time back then, and run guys all because that's what I thought it was. But now that we know, and there's so much information that you can know it, the fact that so many people still, it is actually mind blowing, and that's where Tony and actually you and what we're doing here, it really is important because we want to get people out of this like limited mindset and this because so many kids do play sports now, right? Like we've argued whether it should be that way.
We've talked about this, right? We've talked about it.
But if they are
mainstream to like get kids involved and go play sports, it's like if they are, at least you want to keep them safe.
Yeah, let's keep them. If they are going to all do it, let's have a good progression on it. Like listen, the thing I hate more than anything, I don't understand why football coaches, the first thing they do. Okay, and I hope by the way, I'm going to preface this saying I didn't even talk to Derek about this beforehand, just in case any of his team does this. But they would run four corners. They run the four corners around the football field. I mean, they did that when I was 8. That's what they did when I was 9, 10 years old, and when I was in high school. So I never understood it back then. I happened to be a track kid. It was easy for me. Okay, but like.
And I wasn't, but I mean, those guys, there was always the guy that you were waiting, like you'd be already on your third static stretch when that guy finished his, or we used to start practice with all right, lap, everybody run a lap, and you'd be already on the ground touching your toes, and that dude's just getting to the line, and you're like, what the fuck, dude?
Right, like,
and it's not like, look, but it's not like that changed throughout the season. Like, it's not like by week 3 he was at the front of the fucking line doing the lap. Nothing changed. He still was at the back at the end of the season,
Like, listen, the first year I coached youth football because I didn't really even, I was developing how I wanted to do it. This is when they were 8. Everybody just went and did this lap. So not 4 corners, they go around the backstop. I was like, all right, go around the backstop. But then I realized, like the second year, I realized. Like we were already doing Tony stuff and talking about. And I realized, like, why? Like I even when we first did it, the first year, I was like, all right, I guess this is what you guys did. But like, I quickly realized, like, I got to get us all out of this kind of stuff. And the next year we evolved it more, and then this year evolved it even more. And I started to realize, like. We want to get them faster so they can run fast in the game. Like, what is the point? Like, so many of these things, like, what is the point? And what is good, Tony always obviously says this, if your team ends up being good, okay, if your team loses, no one's going to listen to you when you're saying all this stuff. So, but
absolutely.
When your team gets good, and this is one of the reasons why they're getting better, then you could kind of tout it a little bit more, and you could start to double down more and more and more on it. And I think it's really, really, I think it's important because too many kids are losing their careers in college because they're getting too much wear and tear when they're younger for no reason.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about the games.
Yes.
It's not the games. It's not the games. It's when we want to wear and tear them and everybody kill each other in practice, and or some version of that. The games is where you should. That's where it is on the line. That's where it should be on the line. And it is a balance because in practice you want to get certain things done, but you also want to be cognizant of and there was a long time where I was cognizant of like, man, we didn't get all this stuff done, but that I'll tell you, DJ taught me those things way back at the beginning, and he would probably say his workloads are too much compared to what he does now. But he was like, I mean, we never wore pads when I coached with DJ. Almost never. Like shoulder pads, Derek. I was like, what?
Look, we used to warm up for games in just jerseys.
I think that's I think that more and more of those
Especially
things,
early in the season, buddy.
yeah, when it's hot.
When it was hotter.
But anyway, no doubt. Like no doubt. Like those innovations are all important. The Junction Boys thing is
If you're not at this point in 2025 and you're the head coach of any sport right now, especially a football, one of your if you're not now looking to see, right, like if you're not looking into other ways than just hammering your guys when it comes to conditioning, then I think you're doing a huge disservice to your kids. And like we talked about, like I think you should be held negligent in some way, shape, or form. And that's coming from a guy who like old school, and I still believe in you got to have a little bit of that, especially when it comes to football. You have to have it because that's what the game entails. But look, at the end of the day, if you can work smarter and not harder and still attain everything, and the kids are, like doing just as well, if not better, then that's what you need to do. You know what I mean? Because that's the world we're living in, dude. Like, I'm not about to just like, yes, there's something to be said for the pushing through all that other kind of shit, but there's a fine line between like what's like getting guys quote unquote tougher or like what's really, really, really like using science in our favor.
Absolutely. And there's zero value to overexposing
crushing
them.
kids. Get the fuck out of here, dude.
There's a difference between running a 20-yard sprint or a 40-yard sprint and running 5 of them back to back as a suicide. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a 200 yard.
Like here, and I would love to question some of the guys that do that. Like, hey, tell me why and where that helps you. Like, oh, well, it helps us in the fourth quarter when we're this or that. Are you running a 200-yard suicide in the fourth quarter?
It's insane.
It is
200-yard. Yeah, it's and that's the thing. It's like, okay, you want to what is it you want to accomplish? You want them to go down
because you just murdered, like, and all that, like
feel some wind,
right?
Okay.
And like all of that joy that the kids from playing that sport are now out the window because all they're going to think about is I come to practice, I have to run a 200-yard sprint, and you're going to do that, right? Like you're taking all of the out of everything before you even whatever. You know what I mean?
A 20. There's such a difference between if you said 20 yards down and back versus 40 yards down and back 4 times. And I don't think that enough coaches yet realize you can get a little bit of what you're trying to accomplish. Okay. And I don't think you need to run after practice, but for the guys that feel like there's some necessary to it, do it with a 20-yard down and back, or do a 10-yard down and back, or 10-yard just so they get change of direction, right? And a little bit of exposure to it, but they're doing it fast versus down, back, down, back, down, back. Like you're in a jogging contest. Okay. Like, like who has the best cross country experience is going to have the best chance here. And I think that's, I don't know how you get it out of these guys other than you work them out of the system. Like that's really, really what it is. You work them out of the system. And that's not the same as like you getting on someone for not being physical in the game or not.
It's totally different. It has nothing to do with it, dude.
It has nothing to do with it. And if you come out of there and you say, you know what, we're not in enough shape, okay, for whatever reason, you do it at the beginning of practice and you progress it. So where you're at Monday to Wednesday to by Wednesday next week.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, it's going to take you 2 weeks to get there. Sorry, that's what it is. If the kids didn't do enough on their own, or you didn't build them up at all, you did nothing from that standpoint.
That's on you.
That's on you. And then but you're going to have to do it in progression. It's going to take you a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks to get there. But if you do it all at once, the guarantee is that they're going to get hurt and they're not going to want to play.
Guaranteed, buddy. Guaranteed. Or you just cost it and now you lost them for the season.
Yep. The injury thing, how many injuries I had at the end of the season this year, other than things like a couple of guys with severs, which by the way, there's a way to prevent
Something
that
in the
too.
water, huh?
You know, well,
Right.
it's the field. But you know how we solved that? I told the kids. My son was I knew I had experience from him on that. I told him and the other kids that had it. I said, wear sneakers at practice. I don't care if you can make a cut on grass better. I care if you could make that cut in the game. Okay. Yeah. Am I sacrificing a little bit? Yeah, because you know what? I need you healthy. I need you to be able to play, not to be able to not play because I made you practice in cleats, which hurt you. Those are things that coach like when kids say their feet hurt, when kids say their knees hurt, you need to know why. Like you need to know what it is. Maybe they're maybe they're squatting too much, like in season, like
Everything.
Like that's another thing that people do. So I think too much, like crazy heavy squats in practice. I don't in season, like
just idiots, dude. They just don't know.
Like I don't know why we need. And I thought the last thing before we go, what I loved about Rob is his ability to want to individualize things for his athletes. Like that to me, like what they feel. That was you saw me when I brought it up yesterday because it was something that like was in my head. Like every person's different, and I brought it up, and his answers were great, by the way, absolutely great, and there was nothing wrong with the answer. But what I do think is like you do have to know what the athlete feels about certain
100%.
things because I think that is important for performance. So even though the answer is correct, you still have to figure out either how do you convince that athlete that you're correct, or how do I adapt to the athlete of what he may need for himself. It's one of those two. Like sometimes you can convince them that your way is the best, and maybe over time, and then they do it. Sometimes Dak Prescott's still going to go out there and do his hip thing. Now, he doesn't care if you tell him that is just placebo. It makes him feel like he's ready to go. Just like, I used to watch, I think they're hilarious, but Jameis Winston's QB training drills. I mean, they look like they're like I was like, is this guy shot? Exactly. But you know what? It's what works for him, dude. It was what worked for him. It's like
teaching taught that. You know what I'm saying? Like you're in a classroom, you got 20 kids, you can't just cookie cutter that thing, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like you got to figure out how each kid learns, what makes them go, you know what I mean? And you got to gear your lessons towards that. You know what I'm saying? So one day I know I'm going to hit, 7 of the 20 kids, and another day I'm going to hit 8 of the 20 kids with or what I'm doing or whatever. You know what I mean? And then if there's still somebody struggling, like you got to know. But that's why it's like really hard. Those September, October, like Thanksgiving, where you really start to get the feel of like each kid in your class, right? Depending on numbers and whatever. And like, all right, Jimmy needs this, needs that. That's what good do. You know what I mean? The other guys that just go in there and roll it out, and they're like, "Oh, this is what we're doing. Figure it out on your own." That to me, that's bullshit. Some people may argue that you're holding their hands too much. They got to figure things out on their own, or yada yada. Like, buddy, you know how they're gonna figure things out in life? They're gonna take their phone and they're gonna ask it the fucking question, and you know what? It's gonna tell them. So like, I gotta teach them life skills, dude, and like, help them in that respect. So.
Absolutely.
But no, Rob was good, man. I liked him. He was really awesome.
Really, really awesome. That place has got it going on.
Shit, bro. That high school. Good luck. Like anybody that goes to that high school, dude, you should realize like you're so fortunate. Tomorrow morning, Zach Goodell. former
got it.
Rutgers receiver, walk on. His father's actually the head wrestling coach at Rutgers, Tom's River East, I believe. So be cool to talk
And
to him
you
about
you already
life
have
as
the
a
link,
walk
right?
on.
Yeah, I sent you the link.
Yes, I already sent it. Yep, already sent it to him. So we're good to go.
All right, man. See you tomorrow. Great
All right, buddy.
job.
See you in the morning. No fire alarms. So good job.
You know, I have the thing sitting right next to me. Over here.
See you in the morning, buddy.
All right, bye.